partner with Axon, you immediately gain access to a full range of products and solutions designed to meet the complex needs of today's grower. We carry all major brands and sizes of tires and wheels. We specialize in large diameter wheels for large equipment. We have one of the largest OEM replacement wheel inventories in North America. Known for extreme flotation setups, duals, and triples, we have wheels for all makes and models of tractors, sprayers, combines, and grain carts. If we don't have the wheel in stock, we'll custom build, sandblast, and paint in-house. There isn't a more vast inventory in North America dedicated to helping dealers move more iron. With facilities on the West Coast and in the heart of the Midwest, leverage our 230,000 square feet of indoor inventory to solve any problem a grower may have. Move more iron with Axon.
Moving iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast number 340. This edition of Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Axon Tire, helping dealers move more iron for the past 100 years. For more information, go to axontire.com. Axon Tire has a couple great gifts they're giving away to all the people of the Moving Iron Podcast. Go to marketing, send an email to marketing@axontire.com, and you will get a flashlight and a ball cap from our friends over at Alliance for free, Alan. You don't have to pay for it. It's the most amazing thing on the planet. Get one of those. So if you're interested in that, send an email to marketing@axontire.com. And they will send that over to you. Also, go to Moving Iron LLC and sign up for the Moving Iron Summit coming up here in Nashville, Tennessee. And Axon Tire will give you $50 off of your registration fee. So pretty good deal there, too. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 for all your trucking needs at Valley Transportation. Our goal is to help you reach yours. Tractor Zoom has access to over $20 billion in heavy equipment sales. Tractor Zoom's Iron Comps is the industry's trusted solution for transparent equipment values and optimal pricing insights. This podcast is brought to you by Anvil AppWorks, the Dealer Connect CRM iApp with integrated inventory management is an affordable Salesforce-based solution for your dealership. Create connected customer experience and transform how you work today. Also, Iron Solutions, powered by Randall Riley, is a big part of this podcast as well. So I have Alan Hoskins back here with me, and Alan is with American Farm Mortgage, and you are the
President and National Sales Director.
Yeah, I always want to throw CEO in there, Alan, trying to give you more credit than the people over there at the bank want to give you. So it's been so we had to really think long and hard that what we're going to talk about when it came to ag lending before you came on, Alan. I wasn't for sure what we were going to talk about, but then all of a sudden had this kind of from a news perspective, you kind of had a nice little layup there with the SVB bank implosion and I forget the other bank down in, was it Texas? Is that where that was at?
New York.
Okay, sorry, Texas, not bad. But you had two bank failures and it came up, and I mean the one that everyone's most focused on right now is SVB and Silicon Valley Bank, and I think if you look at a lot of things what they were doing, they weren't your traditional bank. Fair statement there, Alan.
I from what I believe I understand, I think that's a fair statement. Yes.
And their focus primarily was, and me being Silicon Valley, there's tons of venture capital money in there, and they were kind of catering to that startup, to that thing. I mean, a lot of people that they had, profit levels weren't overly high, but they were using stock as collateral and these kind of things. And I guess I'd love to get your opinion on this. So about 3 days before the total implosion of SVB Bank, you had one, and I don't remember the guy's name, but you had a guy come out and put a tweet out, and he was a big venture capitalist guy that's got a lot of capital and a lot of clout out there in the venture capital world. And he said, hey, I'm pulling all my money out of this SVB Bank. And 3 days later, SVB Bank comes in and collapses. Had a complete bank run, something like $42 billion worth of cash got pulled out of the bank. Just a typical, 1930s style bank run that you saw, that live in live in lore there for forever. But I guess as you're looking at something like that, Alan, from your perspective as a banker, if you had social media is such a dangerous thing as well as it is. I mean, there's some good that comes out of social media, and I'm going to stress the word some, and then there's but things like this that come from that where one sentence can do some real damage. What are your thoughts about that, Alan?
Well, first of all, Casey, social media in and of itself is neither negative nor positive. It's a tool. It all goes back to us, I think, as human beings, and what is the goal of the commentary that we provide specifically as it relates to social media. I believe, and Casey, I don't remember who the source was several years ago, but I remember reading the story about if you're angry or upset at something, you need to absolutely write it out and probably wait a day and then maybe delete it and then perhaps rewrite it. I didn't see the specific tweet that you're talking about, but I'll say this. I do think anytime that we do anything on social media, I think we need to be cognizant of the weight that our words carry, both positive and negative. And, ultimately, I certainly haven't spoken to anyone that was a customer of Silicon Valley Bank, so I don't know what effect that tweet may or may not have had on the actions that any depositors there took. But I think it is an excellent reminder for all of us that we need to measure our words and make sure that as much as possible we're adding to something positively as opposed to something negatively. And, Casey, I've always been in the mindset that if I had positive things to say, I wanted to say those as much publicly as possible. But if I had challenges or concerns, I needed to go to the individual, perhaps with whom I had the challenge or concern, and have that conversation privately.
Yeah, that's always the best way to do it. But Alan, I think unfortunately, you're a little bit old school, because it doesn't seem like that happens very much anymore.
Guilty as charged. Yes, sir. I am old school. And, I fully realize, Casey, and I've been guilty of it too. I'm certainly not perfect. I've said things in the past that afterwards I thought, well, that wasn't a very intelligent thing to say. And more importantly, the timing of saying it was not very good. And it is the world that we live in, that it does seem that there are a lot of voices that want to see who can scream the loudest to attract the most attention. And again, I don't know specifically what effect that tweet may have had, but I don't think it's necessarily a positive thing to go on any social media platform, and whether it's a bank or any other business, say, I'm going to withdraw all the business that I do with that institution.
Yeah, I would. Well, that's the same thing too. Like, you get the Google review thing, and the first thing I do when I go check something out, I want to go eat someplace. The first thing I do is I go look at the reviews. And 9 times out of 10, when you read the negative reviews, it's the most petty thing on the planet that I've ever read in my life.
Yes, sir.
It's sometimes I read the negative reviews just to get a chuckle, because someone was mad about I had to wait 15 minutes to get my water refilled. And they gave me, I'm like, come on, man. I know you're not the only person in the room here, bud. So, but yeah, it's things like that do make a world difference. So, I guess, Alan, so you're looking at, so obviously, my grandpa in the 1980s worked for the FDIC, and he spent a lot of time out in Western Kansas getting banks that were in really bad trouble back to healthy again, or closing those banks down and or consolidating banks or those kind of things to keep the wheels on the bus turning. The first thing that everybody's worried about now is, here we are in, loan renewal, operating note renewal season, and we're already dealing with these high interest rates anyway. Something like this comes along, and it just puts it's a boa constrictor around everything, just kind of squeezing things tighter and tighter and tighter. As you take a look around at the rural banks and the rural economy right now. Alan, what are your thoughts, and how do you think this has affected people, lenders, I guess, point of view, and maybe change some of their opinions at all?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, and again, I don't have any intimate knowledge of either of the institutions that were shuttered last week. I will say this, I don't believe I've read of either of them being a large lender or an active lender at all in the ag space. So as it relates to how they may or may not have functioned, it doesn't seem that has a whole lot of bearing on the agricultural world. For the most part, Casey, from at least the things that I read that are public information, the agricultural banking industry in rural America appears to be pretty strong. And I think if you look at where most farmers have been profitability wise, and from a balance sheet perspective over the past few years, those balance sheets and the farm net income would seem to support that there is stability in the agricultural banking sector in rural America. And, it's kind of interesting. The agricultural banking sector goes from larger institutions to the very smallest of community banks. So agriculture has been served and is being served by institutions of multiple size. I think from just a lender's perspective, and you spoke of it earlier in referencing your grandfather in the 1980s, those of us that remember agricultural banking in the 1980s, unfortunately, a bank foreclosure is not anything of earth-shattering news.
Right.
We saw a lot of that during that period of time. And Casey, I'm not telling you I'm right in what I'm about to say, but I do think that there were a lot of different factors that contributed to what we saw in the 1980s. And I think that there were some lessons learned from that have helped probably prevent some bank failures down the road. So I think, unfortunately, what we went through in the 80s certainly wasn't pleasant by any stretch of the imagination, but it does seem that there were some good lessons learned from that thus far have not been repeated. I've not talked to many lenders that honestly, in the segment that I'm involved in, that are changing the way they do business because of what the recent occurrences are.
Yeah.
The agricultural perspective, I think, tends to be one of a fair amount of detail that I think there's some good ag banks and good ag lenders out there that understand the industry. And I think, Casey, that tends to help ensure stability. One of the things that we have seen occur since the 1980s, we've seen the number of banks in this country by charter lessen significantly. But even with that reduced number of institutions versus what we saw in the 80s, I do think that there's still a lot of stability in the agricultural banking sector.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, it's been we had a pretty tough run here, from 2014 through 2020, but the last 3 years have been very, very, very solid years. I mean, as far as income goes and this kind of thing. So, I mean, that's outside of just somebody investing, trying to bring back the Twinkie or something like that. We've got a pretty solid program out there right now. So,
and Casey, you referenced the increased interest rates and the effect and challenges it has and creates for producers. Candidly, the same thing holds true with banking institutions, because by their very purpose, banks, for the most part, Casey, banks buy and sell money. We buy money in the form of attracting deposits. We sell money in the form of creating loans. And just as we ask producers to be mindful of their margins, I think there's a lot of good bankers that I know that they work to manage their margins and they work diligently. The banking industry is very regulated, and there are a lot of discussions with regulators about do your positions look like? How are you positioned for rising interest rates? How are you positioned for falling interest rates? So the regulators candidly ask bankers a lot of the same questions in a certain respect that we ask producers. And how are you prepared in a rising interest rate environment versus a falling interest rate environment?
There we go. Somehow I got put on mute there. It's not. Maybe that's a sign, Alan. No one wants to hear me talk. But they have. So yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff, a lot of moving parts here, a lot of things to pay attention to, and banks are always getting stress tests all the time.
Absolutely.
We hear about that all the time. And of course, this kind of stuff just makes those stress tests even more under a microscope and what that looks like. So anyway, so let's bounce off here and talk about kind of what you see happening in the marketplace, Alan. So as you're looking at going through February, going through March, going into planting season, what were some of the big surprises that you saw come out of this renewal season? I mean, are we looking at where you see speculatively where you see input costs and how they've adjusted down from what they were this time last year, or what were some of the big surprises that you saw come out of this renewal season?
Well, I think for me personally, Casey, one of the biggest surprises that I've seen was the reduction in fertilizer prices, for example. That was not something that I was particularly anticipating. And so that's been a very positive surprise. Candidly, there haven't been a tremendous number of surprises that I've seen that have come out of this. And I think that's because I think we've been to a certain degree a little bit hyper diligent with the movement in interest rates that we've seen in trying to anticipate what cash flows were going to look like. I think producers, for the most part, Casey, have done a tremendous job. And by the way, I'm not surprised at that either, by the way. I think they've done a tremendous job in being prepared for what they were facing. I think they also were pleasantly surprised by some of the movements that we've seen in fertilizer prices. So this has somewhat been a renewal year where there weren't a lot of unanticipated items that have occurred. And I can tell you that's probably not the norm.
Yeah. So when you're looking at, so let's talk about interest rates for just a minute. So last week, Chairman Powell got up on Capitol Hill and said, hey, we're still going to fight this thing. We still got to keep rolling. 25%, I hope it's not 25%, a quarter percent, another hike in interest rates. And then we're going to kind of wait and see is kind of what he said. Well, the CPI report came out and it was 6% down from 6.4%. I mean, really, this could be one of those wait and see kind of moments in time. But since they kind of said they already were going to do that, I'm sure they're going to fall through with that. What that looks like. This is the fourth or fifth month in a row where you've seen a pretty steady decline. Last month, you saw the inter-month CPI stuff jump way up because of some housing things and those kind of things. But that pretty well took care of itself and kind of remedied itself. I guess, Alan, looking at what the Fed's policies are now and what they're doing, what's your thoughts there, and how do you think a wait and see approach is going to? I guess how are you looking forward to handle that on the wait and see side of it when you're working with your customers, where this won't be, maybe next month might not be a jump in rates.
Casey, the one thing that I've kind of learned over the years is, despite what rhetoric may indicate, we deal with what we have today. Sure. And we work to position to minimize any increases to borrowers. Candidly, I wouldn't want Chairman Powell's job right now.
I wouldn't either.
Particularly with some of the challenges that have come up over the weekend. What effect that may have on future interest rate increases. I have heard a lot of people way more intelligent than I bantering that back and forth. And what I'm doing, Casey, is I'm meeting with customers, is we're simply looking at today. We're looking at where rates are both variable and fixed today. We can run numbers for customers and then do the best we can to give them the information they need to allow them to make the most educated decisions.
Yep.
I do get a lot of questions, candidly, where do you think rates are going to be? And Casey, I'm equally adept at answering that question as I am where commodity prices are going, where equipment prices are going.
Kind of feel if you knew that, we wouldn't be talking right now. So
yes, and some of the biggest issues that I've ever created for myself personally have been where I believed I had knowledge of where something was going in the future. I found if I worry about managing risk as it exists today and not worry as much about the future, it tends to result in a lot better outcome.
Yeah. You're probably right on that one, Alan. If I had $1 for every time I thought I knew the way things were going to end up, I'd be equally as rich as if I would have hit on my idea. So yeah, there's some truth to that. So let's talk about equipment a little bit as you're looking at some, I think challenging is probably the right word when you're looking at financing the equipment that we see now, considering interest rates and considering what machinery costs are looking like right now. Alan, as you're looking at machinery right now, what are some of your thoughts there, and what are some of the advice that you're giving to your customers right now?
Well, obviously, I believe recently we're getting into planting season. Yep. And I think if you look at some of the sales data that exists on used planters, it's strongly supportive that there's still a very limited amount of market availability.
Hardly any. Yeah.
Exactly. So one of the discussions that I'm having with folks is about their capital plans.
Yeah.
Be it 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, because having to make an emergency purchase right now, particularly with where interest rates are, it just doesn't, Casey, make a lot of sense to me. If it can be avoided, let's have a plan. And also, one of the things that obviously that I counsel to look at, there's leasing options, there's purchase options.
Yeah.
How does it best position you from a tax perspective? There are advantages to both of those, but the advantages apply differently to each individual operation. I think that's a great conversation for producers to have with both their bankers and their accountants, is as they look at items in the future, which type of financing vehicle works better for them, which gives them the best long-term outcome based upon what we know of the machinery market today.
Yeah.
I'm not of the mindset, Casey, I'm not necessarily telling folks, delay your purchase because equipment is going to fall off the cliff. I don't necessarily believe it's going to.
No, it's not, unfortunately.
No. So that bodes well for the financial statements.
Sure.
Because
absolutely.
Certainly going to help those continue to be strong, but it does create challenges as they look at acquisitions going forward.
Yep.
So I think from the interest rate perspective, a purchase that someone needs to make versus a purchase someone wants to make, it's a lot better to take a little time right now and make sure that we know which side of the equation that's on.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not an advocate for guys just standing still. I don't believe that delaying all purchases is necessarily the right thing. Certainly it varies by operation, because there still is going to be a need to upgrade equipment. And I think it's good to just be mindful of what's available in the marketplace and where trends are going, so that when it's time to have a discussion about that, we know whether it's a need or we know whether it's a want, and we can make sure how it really fits in the operation's overall cash flow. One thing, Casey, that I am I've had this discussion with a couple of customers. Looking at the technological side, looking at as purchases or upgrades are made, it's not, and I've said this before on your podcast, it's not just about the cost, it's about the profit potential of those upgrades.
Sure.
That's something that I like spending some time with people on, is let's look at what the overall effect is on your operation. Because I have one customer in particular, they made some planter upgrades that I can point to their yield history, and we can tell to the year when those upgrades were made to that planter, because they've seen a consistent historic yield bump since they did that.
Yeah. I will say this with great certainty that, and bet a significant amount of money on this, that the next 5 years, the way farming is going to change, agriculture production is going to change, is going to be, it'd be almost unrecognizable, I think, in some extent, how what it is today to what it will be. And I think the easiest thing to point to is going to be the equipment side of this. And it's like the perfect thing happened in the equipment business at the perfect time. You know what I mean? We came out of a time where inventory levels were really high, and had those inventory levels stayed the way they were, and we would have moved into a high production news cycle, it would have just been a whole nother thing again. We would have had 3 or 4 years of a good run, and then we would have seen massive amounts of used equipment out there in the marketplace, and it would just been a whole nother thing again. Where we're at now, as I look at this, with the exception of a handful of, like combines and forage harvesters and those kind of things that are just typically hard to sell used anyhow, and that struggle that we see with used harvesting equipment, especially, we're not going to ever. I just don't see where we're going to have the pile up in used equipment again. I just don't see where. If we do have it, it's a long ways down the road, and something catastrophic will have to happen where, we don't produce a crop for 2 years type of thing. I mean, it's going to be something so big, because when you look at, and I've talked about this offline as well as online here, but I mean, 21 through 23, there just weren't that many machines built, and what was built has been gobbled up pretty quick, and it's left a big hole in the overall marketplace as to where those used machines fall into that cycle of that life cycle of equipment. And there's a big gap right there where you have really, really new stuff, and you have some really, really old stuff, but you don't have much in the middle. And I think that's going to be the saving grace for the equipment marketplace. And to your point, balance sheets for farmers, for a long time, we start looking at how their equipment holds its value and maintains that. I mean, moving forward. So there's going to be a lot of risk factors, I think, that are going to kind of go away a little bit. Now, all that being said, the big kind of elephant in the room here that nobody knows how to get out of the room yet is these upgrade kits, and what do those look like now? So we have this big rush into the upgrade kit thing, which I think is amazing. I think it's a great idea. When the next gen technology starts showing up, and you start looking at, okay, I want to go ahead and upgrade to this next level of whatever. What do you do with the stuff that's there? And we've been fighting that battle a little bit on the precision side for as long as I've been in this business, it seems like. And now it finally came to head, and we're watching some of the stuff sell on auctions, and it's 25 cents, 30 cents on the dollar. So what's that mean? What's that look like? And how does those things come together? From the other side, you start looking at sprayer upgrades and those kind of things. It'll be interesting to watch it play out, because it's going to be, there's no formula for this yet. We don't know. We're still trying to figure out how to make the cake and what oven we're going to put it in to make it all work. And it's been I'm excited to be a part of this, because it's going to be one of those time frames where you tell your kids about it, or the next generation coming into the business. I remember back in 23 when it was just, you had to do these things, and it's this, you get to be you have your old man story now. So I'm kind of excited about that.
And, Casey, I think in alignment with what you just said, relative to specifically the old man stories, it seems like the old man stories are starting to occur a little more quickly than they used to, just simply due to the
Yeah,
pace of change.
that's true. Yeah.
I think there's some 35-year-olds today that are able to tell old men stories
I think you're right.
because
Yeah.
of what we've
Yeah.
seen. And I agree with you. I think the pace of that change is going to quicken rather than slow.
Yeah.
So I think it is really a fun time to be in agriculture as a whole. And the pace of change is somewhat frustrating at times, without a doubt. But it's a great opportunity to continue to grow and learn. And I think the producers with good business acumen out there are really going to take advantage of some of these things that are coming available.
Oh, sure. This is one of those time frames where there's going to be a lot of opportunities that pop up that don't seem like opportunities right now. But if you really dig into them and start looking at them, you're going to see the opportunity. I'm pretty sure it was John May, CEO of John Deere, said something to the effect, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the pace of change has never been more slow than it is today. And he's referencing the future and what does that look like and those kind of things. And some of this technology that's coming down is going to greatly it's just going to change the way people do business. And I've said this before, that I think technology is going to pick winners and losers a hell of a lot faster than any commodity price is going to, because you really do know how technology is playing out. Everybody's not on the same playing field anymore. If you can afford to get to the latest and greatest, your efficiencies are going to stand out, and your yield return is going to stand out, and those cost savings in fertilizer and chemicals and all the other stuff that come into play, they're going to start showing up. And if you're not using that, it's going to be hard to compete. And I hate to be that guy that's sitting here saying that, but I mean, as you look at some of the stuff, you can go back 30 years and hear the conversations about, auto track and, RTK and everything else. And, that's just a toy. You don't need that. Well, I know guys that'll blow up an engine before they'll stop, and they'll stop as soon as they lose the AV line on the guidance system. So I mean, I think it's going to be, and guys like you on the lending side, it's going to be you've got to understand what's going on. And fortunately, Alan, your customer base has got a good guy that understands what's going on and understands the business. But it feels like the learning curve. It's almost like I need to start going out to some of these local banks, like, hey, let me talk to you about what this looks like and how this works. This isn't a sales pitch for trying to get, Farmer John over there to buy the new planter from me, but this is what he's going to gain by using this technology. And here's what the return is going to look like and those kind of things. Because I can tell you right now, there's every guy that I work with has already worked through what the return on assets look like, on his investment looks like. And because there's more business acumen out there now on the farm than there's been in past generations. And I think this is going to be, it's not an emotionally driven decision anymore. It's a business driven decision. And I think that's the big difference right now between what we see happening on the overall marketplace.
And Casey, I could not agree with what you just said more. One of the challenges, and kind of going full circle, going back to kind of where we started a little bit, the conversation as it relates to banking, one of the observations that I will make is that if I look at the bankers that I know today that are involved in agricultural lending, I know fewer ag bankers today that are active farmers than probably any time in my career. Now, that shouldn't be surprising, because when I started my banking career, it was pretty common for an ag lender to also be a farmer. But as farms have consolidated and as banks have consolidated, candidly, there's just fewer people that are growing up on farms that are coming into the marketplace. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't some incredibly bright young people coming into ag banking, because there are. And it doesn't mean that those folks can't add value, because I truly believe they can if they take the time to learn and understand their customer challenges and really dig into it. But I think the number of ag bankers that have firsthand knowledge of farming is shrinking. And Casey, the other thing that has changed in banking versus when I started, for the most part, lenders would develop their own business, underwrite their own loans, in many cases, prepare their own loan documents, close the loans. And traditionally speaking, today, that's not the case. The banking industry is a little more segmented within the bank, where you have units of the institution that are involved in perhaps underwriting versus a separate unit that's involved in the sales side of it. And so that's a little different than what historically has been. But your commentary about teaching bankers, most bankers I know are willing to learn. They tend to want to really do what they can to help their customers, and they understand increasing their knowledge is the single best way that they can possibly do that. And the best way that any of us can increase our knowledge is learn how to listen better, and make sure that we're taking time to listen to people like you and experts that we can learn from, so that we can actually provide value that is meaningful to the customer. Because just because I think I provide value as a banker doesn't mean that I provide value. The customer gets to decide whether I provide value. So I think it's important that we take the time to learn. So I love your idea. Candidly, I think a class for bankers on some of the technologies that are available and how the customer and ultimately the bank can profit by those particular upgrades, I think would be a fantastic idea.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity there to get everybody on the same page, at least to understand what's going out there. So, well, Alan, man, I'll tell you what, I think that's a good place to stop. If folks want to reach out to you and get more information about what it is you're doing over in American Farm Mortgage, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. They can reach out by phone. The phone number is 800-876-2362, or they can reach out to me via email at ahoskins, HOSKINS, at AmericanFarmMortgage.com. And Casey, always love to hear from people, love to hear comments, and appreciate the opportunity to be with you today, and really enjoy being a part of this. You do a great job and provide a great service to the ag community.
Well, I appreciate that, Alan. It's having smart guys like you on here make me look pretty smart, and that's really saying something, Alan. I got no idea. So I appreciate you being on, man, and we'll catch you next month.
Well, and Casey, one thing before we do go, I would encourage anyone that hasn't been to the Moving Iron Summit before, take the time to register, folks. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to meet a lot of great people, and it's going to be an experience that you will definitely bring something home from.
Well, I appreciate that too, Alan. Thank you, man. All right, I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Moving Iron LLC. Go to LinkedIn at Moving Iron Podcast and check out the video version of this over on the LinkedIn or over on the YouTube channel, which is cleverly named Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel. So check that out there. If you want to go see everything Moving Iron related, go to MovingIronLLC.com, and you can sign up for the Moving Iron Summit up there on that site there up the upper right hand corner. Click on the Moving Iron Summit tab and fill that out, and you'll get that $50 discount if you're one of the first 150 people to sign up from Axon. If you want to see more information about the entire library of that stuff there, it's all that there. And I've got about 4 or 5 blogs that I've posted are up there now too. So check that out over there on the website. So with that, I'm Casey Seymour with Alan Hoskins. Let's go smart, folks. Out.
Moving iron in the 21st century.